I'll start again, shall I?
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this National Liberal Club European Forum event on what's next for Brexit. Welcome to many distinguished National Liberal Club members, many invited guests, including members of the Liberal Democrat European Group. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Trevor Peel, Chair of the National Liberal Club European and Commonwealth Forums, for his energy and vision in driving this series and an absolutely terrific series of study visits, which are really well worthwhile going on if you haven't been on one. I'm Nick Hopkinson. I'm a member of the National Liberal Club Forum. I'm a former chair of LDEG and former director of Wilson Park. Briefly, in case you're wondering, I was brought up in Quebec, so I'm a bit of a veteran of referendums. We have three excellent speakers tonight. I won't introduce them at length, as I'm sure many are known to you, and you want to hear their 7-minute introductions. In the second half, after the speakers, we'll have a brief panel discussion and then some time for some of your questions, and then Emily Robinson will wrap up the hour for us. I don't really need to set the scene. I think we all know it, but we're fast approaching the first anniversary of leaving European Union institutions, and it's a month since we've left the single market and customs union in particular. That, of course, doesn't mean that Brexit is done. We so far have a no-deal Brexit in services trade, notably in financial services. And of course, the trade and cooperation agreement as signed is fragile, especially its governance provisions, and is subject to 5 yearly reviews. So arguably, we've reached the nadir, and our focus now is how best to manage the negative impact of Brexit and start building and campaigning for the closest possible relations with the EU. Anyway, to kick us off, our first speaker is the Liberal Democrats parliamentary spokesperson for Trade and Treasury, Christine Jardine. And without further ado, over to you for your 7 minutes, followed by Professor Gray.
Okay, well, hello, yes, sorry about that. It's lovely to be with you all virtually, and unfortunately I can't promise you the splendour of the David Lloyd George room or Gladstone. This is just my dining room, and the only portrait I have is actually not me. I don't know if you can see it above my head, but several people have commented and said, why do I always have a picture of myself behind me? It's not me, it's my daughter. But the saving grace, I suppose, is that she is also a Liberal Democrat. So there we go. It's almost as good as being in the real place. But thank you very much. It's lovely to see you all again. And I suppose we are at the point which we always hoped to avoid. A relationship that many of the Conservatives would have us believe a relationship with the European Union is a thing of the past, and we move on. Well, maybe's aye, maybe's no, as they might say in some Scottish comedy programmes. And I think what we do now is we work on the 3 R's, as we used to do in Scottish schools, but perhaps not the 3 R's of reading, writing, arithmetic that we were taught then, but the 3 R's of rejoin, recovery, and roadmap. What we need is a roadmap out of COVID-19 that will allow the economy to recover. And a vital part of that must be long-term, probably, rather than short-term, rejoining the European Union. I don't know how anybody could be in any doubt about that being the position we would take. I know there's been a lot of debate in the media about it, and the SNP are throwing all these brickbats at us about how we are no longer a party of rejoin, we are Brexiteers. Where they get that from, I don't know. But anybody who knows anything about liberal traditions and internationalism would know that it will always be our aim to one day return to the European Union. But I think we do need a roadmap that, as I say, leads to recovery and back to the EU, and that we have to start working on that. And that when we're all next together at conference, that needs to be the focus of what we discuss. How we build on what we have at the moment. The deal is dreadful, but at least it is still a doorway to the European Union. We need to improve it, and we need to, perhaps Rachel Reeves hinted that we might have an alliance at some point with the Labour Party. I use that word, I use the term alliance carefully, not coalition, working arrangement. She said that their aim will be to endure this deal for 5 years, but win the next general election and build on it, get something better. That's a starting point. But I think more important for us is what Alistair Carmichael said last weekend in Cambridge. We need to work out where we want to go and how we want to do it. And our first step could be EFTA. We could look at having the same sort of status as Norway, getting back into the customs union, and getting a trade deal for our financial services, and moving towards rejoining in a way that takes the British public with us. We don't say to them, see, we told you this would be what happened. Look at what's happening to the fishing industry. Look at the financial sector. This is all the fault of Brexiteers. No, 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 we don't do that. We criticise the government, we hold them to account, and we work towards getting the British public behind us. And while we're doing that, we keep as Willie Rennie is telling us all at the moment, a needle-sharp focus on recovering from COVID and getting the economy back on track. And I think that will go hand in hand with the evident benefits of the European Union. They will become more obvious every day as people see how the economy is being affected. We have a slight problem in Scotland. It's called the Scottish National Party. And, you know, I feel Nick's pain. We've had 2 referendums in the past decade. We've got another one coming up if they have their way, which we'll try to avoid. And they would break up the UK. So I think we have to be aware of that danger. And that is another reason why we have to state quite clearly, certainly in Scotland, that we are a party committed to the European Union and to rejoining at the appropriate time. So for me, it's quite simple. We have come through a lot of pain as a party because of what we believed with respect to the European Union. We are going through a lot of pain as a country because of the decisions we made about the European Union. But while Brexit might be, in Boris's jargon, done, our relationship with the European Union is not. And what we need now is to lift our eyes, look at the horizon and say, that is where we want to be. We need the roadmap to there, and that roadmap will be our way of recovering from COVID-19 and leading us back into the European Union. I was going to say simples, but unfortunately I don't think it will be.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Christine, and thank you for keeping to time and very helpful opening statement. So we now turn to our next speaker, Professor Emeritus Chris Gray of Royal Holloway, University of London. As many of you know, he's one of the leading, if not the best, regular blogger on EU policy and on Brexit and beyond. So if you don't sign up to his regular blog, please do so. So over to you, Chris.
Okay, thanks. Hello, thanks so much for inviting me. And if you do want to follow the blog, you just need to Google it. And if you Google best Brexit blog, it comes up at the top of the list. And so that's great. And I was really pleased about that, except that I discovered if you Google worst Brexit blog, it also comes to the top of the list. But you can find it one way or the other. I think that happily what I'm going to say is probably quite compatible with what's just been said, but maybe a couple of slight differences of emphasis. Firstly, just to kind of say, what we are seeing or what we've seen in the last month, the so-called kind of teething problems of the TCA, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. They're nothing of the sort. I mean, to the extent they are to do with a lack of preparedness, that itself derives from the fact that because of this kind of project fear narrative, many businesses, really didn't even believe that they were going to have to prepare for anything, and certainly the failure to extend the transition period compounded that. But the teethingness is really only to say this is that it currently is visible, but what will happen quite shortly is it will become less visible because it will become embedded in a complete structural change in the trading relationships between UK and EU, and a complete restructuring of international supply chains as well. That won't mean that the problems have gone away. It will mean that the new cost structures of businesses have become embedded within the system. And I think the other thing, where so many of the effects have been seen, but which again isn't going to go away, is in relation to Northern Ireland. And I think it's an underappreciated point that what the deal, and by the deal I now mean the withdrawal agreement, that what the withdrawal agreement did in order to take Great Britain out of the European single market, it effectively put an end to the United Kingdom single market. There is no longer a UK single market because of Northern Ireland. I think there's interesting, important political questions about how Brexiters, in terms of the sort of leadership, but also, of course, particularly in terms of Leavers, react to that. And clearly, the narrative of the leading Brexiters is going to be that, well, it's got nothing to do with Brexit, or it's because Brexit hasn't been properly done, or and Brexit wasn't properly done because of Remainer opposition, or because it's the fault of the EU for sort of punishing the UK, or sort of something like that. And those lines are sort of quite familiar and quite predictable. In terms of the immediate future, I think that it continues to be important. I mean, I agree with the point that it's not enough just to sort of say, oh, we told you so, we told you it would be awful, and so on and so forth. But I think that the notion of continuing to keep a focus on the accountability of what is happening and why remains an important one. And I think the Labour Party's stance is extremely disappointing in that respect, because they seem almost terrified to mention it. I guess in case of being sort of scared of being accused of being Remainers or something like that. But I think it is important to do that, not just because the accountability is right in itself, but because if there is to be a closer long-term future between the UK and the EU, that has to involve a shifting of the internal discussion within the United Kingdom, because it's not, even if we look ahead to, or if we were to look ahead eventually to the notion of kind of rejoining, it would be absolutely disastrous, not just for the UK, but for the EU, if that were to come about in a circumstance where there hadn't been a definitive kind of sea change, if you like, in the UK domestic narrative about the European Union. And certainly that wouldn't yield, I think, a kind of a stable long-term kind of outcome. And so that narrative needs to change as well. And part of that has to be the challenge of accountability for what has happened. But I think the other important thing is and really challenging thing is to reset the narrative and in particular the tone of with which UK and European Union relations are conducted. And the key thing here, I think, is to say that the mandate of the 2016 referendum, whatever people think of that mandate, the mandate such as it was, has been fully discharged now. There was no mandate in that referendum that gave the Brexiters the lockhold over the terms in which the future relationship between the UK and the EU should be conducted. And clearly, you know, they are going to seek to continue to make that as antagonistic as possible. You can see that in the issue about diplomatic recognition for the EU ambassador. You can see it in terms of some of the things which are being said about the vaccine row and all that stuff which is going on at the moment. And so changing that narrative sort of becomes crucial, and the immediate vehicle for it is obviously the various partnership arrangements under the TCA, but also I would suggest not to be forgotten the forum in terms of the joint committee with respect to the Northern Ireland Protocol, because that's an important place as well. I think, if I may say so, that some of the references to doing a financial services deal within that are rather kind of off the mark. I mean, there is no free trade agreement in the world which has substantial coverage of financial services. I mean, yes, there may be a decision about regulatory equivalence separate to the TCA, but there is never going to be the same level of liberalisation of financial services trade under any form of trade agreement as existed within the single market. And it seems to me that changing of the narrative and that changing of the tone becomes particularly crucial in terms of looking ahead to some idea of rejoining single market, perhaps via EFTA, or perhaps a customs union and/or a customs union arrangement. The prior condition for that has to be a change of tone, and certainly, and not just a change of tone, but a substantive improvement in the quality of relations, and certainly that would have to be the precursor to any kind of rejoining. And if I could just finish with a sort of a final point, which may perhaps sound a little bit sort of depressing, but a lot of the stuff and a lot of my kind of background is in sort of the business and organizational stuff that is so heavily impacted by, obviously, by Brexit. And from that point of view, people who want to rejoin the single market, and certainly or rejoin the European Union, do have to recognize that the business demand for that is going to decline over time. And the reason for that is, because certainly with respect to goods manufacturers, and the reason for that is precisely because of the structural change in supply chains we're seeing going on right now. Because once firms have made those changes, the attraction of then changing again to a single market relationship from a business perspective becomes much less. And so I don't think one can necessarily rely on the voice of the business community to continue to be as supportive around the idea of single market as, say, for example, it was during the Article during the Article 50 period. So you know, so everything is going to change in business terms as well, and that's going to change the economic and business landscape for the future relationship as it may develop. So that, I think, is my 7 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. So we'll move to our last speaker, Irina von Wiese, who's a lawyer, lecturer in EU law, and former Liberal Democrat MEP. So Irina, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Yes, I feel a little bit like one of these Jurassic Park dinosaurs. My species, the UK MEP, is extinct, but I feel still alive as a specimen, and I hope one day my species will be resurrected as well. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. I thought I'd use my 7 minutes to talk a little bit about citizens' rights, not only because, like so many things about Brexit, this is pretty personal to me as a dual citizen, German and British national, but also because it is very much at the forefront of the ongoing debate And you may recall that at some point during the Brexit campaign, it was none other than our current Prime Minister who said that no citizens, no EU citizens in the UK would be in any way worse off as a cause of Brexit. And I just wanted to outline why, unfortunately, this is one of the many things that were, let's say, an overpromise. So firstly, who does Brexit really affect? Well, we often hear about the 3 million. Actually, the 3 million is an organization of EU citizens in the UK. There are actually more than 4 million EU citizens who were granted new resident status in the UK, according to European Commission data. Most come from Poland, Romania, Portugal, Spain, and Bulgaria. I presume the difference in numbers is because some of them do, like me, have dual citizenship and have acquired UK citizenship as well. They face, obviously, fewer problems. They still face problems, as I will outline later if we have time. But the vast majority of these people only have the citizenship of their EU country of origin. And so they were promised that their position wouldn't be deteriorating in any way compared to pre-Brexit. Their rights were mainly enshrined in the withdrawal agreement that was concluded in December 2019 and came into force on the 1st of February. And the withdrawal agreement that was then transposed into the UK Withdrawal Act had several incarnations. And I was, as an MEP, very much involved in the negotiations of the withdrawal agreement for the Renew Europe party. And one of the key demands of the European Parliament at the time was to strengthen EU citizens' rights, but also the rights of those 850,000 or so UK nationals who are currently residing in EU member states. So what did we want for those citizens? Firstly, the probably most important demand for the Renew Europe group, which unfortunately has not been translated into reality, is that the settlement should be declaratory and not require a registration. In other words, that you wouldn't have to actively go forward and register for settled status that would prove your rights as an EU citizen in the UK. But that this would be basically a declaratory, and the burden of proof would be with the Home Office to show that you do not have these rights. What has happened in reality, of course, is that EU citizens are required to apply for settled status, that this is not an automatic right, even if the documents are supplied that show effectively 5 years of residence, that a lot of them now still receive what's known as pre-settled status, which then requires further action in order to become fully settled status. The second thing that we demanded was that there be an independent body for arbitration and appeals. That has at least partly been transposed into law, so there is an independent body. We don't know yet how independent and how effective. The third demand was that vulnerable people should get more help. And that is still very much a point of concern. By vulnerable people, we mean mostly those who don't have access to all the digital tools. So I've gone through the settlement and permanent residence procedure before I became an EU citizen, and I can tell you that you certainly do need to be computer literate in order to go through this. There is now, for settled status, there is an app that you have to download, and you then have digital IDs and other things that a lot of people cannot, for various reasons, cope with, and they need help. That help is available, but it is mostly provided by various private organizations, such as this 3 million, and some of the councils who are doing a lot better than others. but it's very patchy, and a lot of people still fall through the net. So we still have a huge backlog in applications, and the deadline being in June of 2021, June this year, we fear that there will be a lot of people who remain exposed and will not have their application granted by that date. And then the final point, which is also very contentious, is the question about documentation. So once you have finally jumped through all these hurdles and you have your settled status, how do you prove at the border that you actually have it? At the moment, there is no piece of paper that says you have settled status. There is no stamp in your passport or anything else. So theoretically, what you have to do is show some digital proof, or dig up some email on your mobile phone, which may have run out of battery exactly at that point when you arrive at the border. And at least anecdotally, since the 1st of January, there have been cases, so when free movement ended, there have been cases reportedly of EU citizens who were asked by border controls where they were going, what they were going to do. It was not only whether they were resident in the UK, but a lot of other questions, including delays. They were essentially treated like third country nationals, and some of them were held up at the border. So without documentation, this is going to be a persistent problem. And I don't know exactly where we're at, but I know that the organization, the 3 million, is now involved in various lawsuits trying to enforce this documentation. Then, of course, there are the UK nationals residing in EU member states, mostly Spain, France, Ireland, Germany, and the Netherlands. Ireland is a separate issue because, of course, Ireland is a common travel zone, but all the other countries, and I see Graham is on the call, he obviously is one of those affected. I'm assuming, Graham, that you have UK and Belgian citizenship, but it is clear that many don't, and there's still not much clarity. Theoretically, their rights are also protected under the withdrawal agreement. In practice, it is the various member states who dictate much of the conditions under which, for example, they can retain their UK pensions and other benefits. Then there is the practice. So this is the theory. Then there is the practice. And in practice, we're still very much facing a hostile environment in the Home Office. If I had more than 7 minutes, I could tell you a lot of horror stories, including actually my own battles with the Home Office regarding my daughter's passport, which is still waiting for. And particularly in the context of the pandemic, there have been cases where EU citizens in the UK were completely stuck, couldn't go home because of the travel restrictions, lost their jobs because, of course, very many of them, particularly in London, work in the hospitality industry, and they were denied universal credit for various reasons because they didn't have the right documents or whatever. So all of this, of course, is entirely unlawful under the protection of the withdrawal agreement. But given the nonchalant way in which Boris Johnson has treated his obligations under the withdrawal agreement and the Northern Ireland Protocol, in another context, of course, this is not surprising. So in conclusion, I think this uncertainty for many EU citizens in the UK prevails. Many of them have gone home already, and others are now very seriously considering it because of the situation, and this will obviously not only make the UK poorer, but also make our journey towards rejoin, I think, more difficult. I leave it at that and look forward to questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Irina, and indeed to all our speakers. So now we have a small segment. I'll ask one question to each of our speakers, and I've already got a few questions in from the participants online, but I'll just start with one question each to each speaker, and perhaps we could just have a sort of brief 1 minute or so quick response to each. So my question to Christine is really a messaging one, and that is amongst Remainers, I suppose now rejoiners. Many rejoiners get very upset when we don't wear the badge rejoin on our, very visibly. And of course, the reality is rejoining is very much a longer term perspective. And they get upset if they hear, we're not a rejoined party. So, I mean, how can we best message that we are committed to rejoining, but without being giving a sort of hostage to fortune, as was mentioned, and we understand we have to rejoin brick by brick, but how do we manage this sort of twin track messaging? My question to Chris was on you alluded to the row on the vaccine, and I was just wondering if I could pursue drill down a little bit and ask how has the EU and AstraZeneca row suddenly become a sort of a trumpet for the Brexiters to say that this is a huge benefit of Brexit, and perhaps you could unpick the thinking there. And lastly, to Irina on citizens' rights, I believe that will be one of the major areas where there will be a European scrutiny of performance of the UK's obligations under the withdrawal treaty and so on. I was just wondering what sanctions or what attitude or how will the Parliament and Commission and indeed member states react to any shortcomings on the UK side? So perhaps over to Christine first. Christine? Christine, unmute, perhaps?
Go. That's fine. It was telling me that the host wasn't allowing me to unmute, and I know that was not what you wanted at all, Nick. So this machine is just playing it up tonight. I think that is a very, very important question, the messaging. And actually, I think we have to have a twin track and the same message, but in distinctive ways and packaged for different people. As members, we should all be 100% confident that we know what any of our elected representatives, spokespeople, officials are going to say about the European Union at any given moment, and why. So that, without wishing to reopen recent sore wounds, if the leader or an MP or the president or one of the peers goes on television and is asked, are you a party of Rejoin? And they say, not at the moment. We all know that that is part of a strategy. We all know what the actual messaging is. And that the messaging to the public has to be, I can't remember who said it, something that takes the public along with it and is by its very nature different from what the membership know and the membership are aware of. So internal communications amongst the membership and the elected representatives about what our policy is and our adherence to it and how we're going to message it is absolutely vital. But we have to package it in a way that attracts votes from other parties. So, and this is not, I'm not an expert in this by any stretch of the imagination, but our policy is quite clear. that we want to rejoin the Union at a point in the future. And we should be, we should all be saying that. But we have to express it in language that doesn't give the Conservatives the opportunity to say, well, that's these Ramoning Liberal Democrats just at it again. So we have to be guided in that way, and we have to express it in a way that wins us support from people who are only just realising the impact of Brexit. As we do that, we have to be continually holding this government to account, pointing out the problems with various different sectors, with the fishing industry, with business. And, when people come to us with an issue, bringing it up, getting it out there. But I'm not suggesting we say two different things. I'm saying we package them in different ways. And that the way to avoid any repetition of any of the things we've had in the past, where somebody said something and then there's been outrage in the party at what they've said, is internal communications. The party must be absolutely confident in what we are saying. And what we are saying should be aimed at bringing people to us and not talking to the people who are already with us. We are already on the same page. It should be bringing people onto that page. And that's how the messaging should be framed. Then we've got people working on that. We've got people in HQ working on our messaging going forward. And for me, it has to all be framed in what I said earlier about working on a roadmap to recovery, which includes rejoining the European Union.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris.
That's the last question I would have wanted to be asked. I don't know very much about it, but I mean, my reading of it is as follows: that from the Brexiters' point of view, that they're making three kinds of argument. One is about the whole vaccine thing. One is that the fact that the EU is slow in approving vaccines, and that proves that it is a lumbering bureaucratic monster. That the UK has rolled out, has done far more vaccinations than any EU country, and so that proves the superiority of Brexit. But I think in particular in the last sort of couple of days, this idea which has come out of sort of saying, oh well, the EU is going to try to take our vaccines from us, and that's a very damaging and divisive kind of message. The problem, well, there are many problems with those arguments, but I think the core difficulty is that to get there, you actually have to have a whole string of kind of counterfactuals about what would have happened otherwise, in terms of what decision, if Brexit hadn't happened, what decisions the UK would have made in terms of the possibility actually of taking an independent line anyway. But if it hadn't done so, and if it had done so, we'd probably be in a similar kind of position. Or if it hadn't done so, then what would the decisions been made in the EU, with Britain as a member, with respect to licensing, or with respect to the kinds of contracts that would have been signed? And you have to put in there are so many different actors there, including the pharmaceutical companies, that the idea you can get from the proposition of what is happening now to the proposition of, well, that is because of that is because of Brexit. If we take sort of seriously the idea that that a butterfly wing flap can produce something as small as that can produce a tropical storm. Well, Brexit was much bigger than the flap of a butterfly's wing, and so you can't, it's a meaningless kind of argument to make, but that will be the argument that they make. And the flip side of that is that, as I think one of the European reporters for Bloomberg TV said today, that actually the narrative within EU countries is not relating to Brexit hardly at all, in general terms. But nonetheless, there are one or two comments made by particular MEPs or something like that that obviously get snatched on by the Brexit press in the UK to amplify that kind of particularly that kind of narrative of the EU is going to try to punish us by taking away our vaccines. So it's just nonsense, is my view.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that would have been a better answer. It's nonsense.
I think
Sorry,
it's not,
Irina, over to you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. If I may, very briefly to the last point, because I'm not sure I 100% agree with the stance Chris has taken. And speaking as a politician, I do worry about the statements that have come out of the EU. Obviously, they're being distorted by the Eurosceptic press in this country, like most things coming out of Europe. But I do think beyond that, there is a grave error of judgment. And particularly in my home country, in Germany, combined with the misleading Handelsblatt article you may have seen on the efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine, which I think wasn't helpful at all, and is going to be exploited for, I'm afraid, quite a long time when it comes to the discussion of our future relationship. So I do worry about these ongoing events in Europe. To get back to your actual question, which was on remedies for breaches in the withdrawal agreement, and I won't bore you with the legal side so much, other than to say there is an independent UK monitoring authority, which is the first appeals body, if you want, for any breaches, and that can then get escalated for EU citizens in the UK, and the European Commission acts as a monitoring authority for UK citizens in the EU. There is, of course, if this cannot be resolved, and then there are regular reports on the implementation of citizens' rights. If this cannot be resolved, as we know from the attempted breach of the withdrawal agreement in the so-called internal markets bill in the summer, there is the opportunity, this is a binding international agreement for the Commission to take this to the international courts and the various proceedings for breach of international law. So it could get escalated. On the political side, of course, there is always reciprocity. We mustn't forget that whatever we do, whenever badly we treat EU citizens in the UK, you know, this could backfire badly if member states decide to retaliate on UK citizens in the EU, and we mustn't forget that as well. So hopefully citizens' rights will still be at the forefront of people's attention going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Needless to say, we have so many questions, and I am afraid that we can't take them all. What I suggest I do is I just take, with apologies to Christian in Paris, there were quite a few questions. I won't capture them all, but Jonathan Fryer talked about assisted repatriation. Tim Hetherington asked about is the issue, the situation with EU citizens here, does it risk escalating to into another Windrush scandal? And Derek Macaulay talked about non-registered EU citizens and removal of their status, I believe. So those would be questions for Irina at the end. Then I suggest a question, two questions that perhaps Professor Gray could handle. One from Noel Hedge-Michael on institutional data and how that's causing problems for business to invest and trade and employ people, and the poor quality of that data. And Humphrey Hawksley has also asked how much are all these problems that we're experiencing at the moment, how much are they teething problems, are they genuine mistakes, and how much can swift negotiation perhaps remedy them? Then I think as the final two interventions, I will ask Subu to unmute Sir Graham Watson and Lord Palmer, who I'm sure will have some questions directly to Christine. And I think that will take us to the end of our time. So if I could ask, may I suggest Sir Graham Watson and Lord Palmer to intervene and make their questions, and Christine to respond, and then Irina on the EU citizenship related issues, and then Professor Gray to wrap up. Graham.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you to all the speakers, because I think there's some very interesting ideas have come out. My question was actually really aimed at Chris, but it comes very much within Christine's idea of bringing people to us. And it's really about where we position ourselves as a party. I mean, I suspect that Boris Johnson, if people have one view of him, it's probably that he is surrounded with an air of untrustworthiness, that folk don't believe he keeps his promises. Now, there is one promise that he has kept. Because if you remember at a diplomatic reception a couple of years ago when he was Foreign Secretary, he said, "Fuck business." Well, he's certainly done that. And we must, you know, make sure people are aware of that. The Tories will retain the support of the hedge funds and the nastier side of the City of London. But potentially they could lose the support of a lot of the rest of the business community, including parts of the city, who've actually been given a hard Brexit. And I just wonder whether we can't build on the excellent work that Jürgen Meyer is doing with the Business and Entrepreneurs Network to make ourselves the party of enterprise. We will also remain the party of citizens' rights that Irina spoke about, but there may be a political space to be where the Venstre party is in Denmark or where the VVD is in the Netherlands, being a centre party, but with the backing of the business community. And that would put us in a completely different ballgame.
Thank you. Lord Palmer.
Yeah, hello. Sorry, it wouldn't let me unmute. So thank you. My questions are about three parts. To Christine. Is that all right? Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Is that the deal that has been passed is a bad deal, and I was particularly delighted in the House of Lords that I am the whole of the Liberal Democrat voted against the deal at the end. And it's a question of messaging, as Christine said. Yes, it's not going to happen immediately, but I don't think those people who supported us are aware that we actually voted against the deal, not because we wanted something different, because it was a bad deal. Secondly, the Professor Gray talked about the businesses having a new life after Brexit. Well, my question to Professor Gray is that does he not think they will have a new life because a lot of them won't be there, because they'll be bust? Then that's the point. It will be starting from a low point, and to say it will be different after Brexit in a better way, I think is wrong. And lastly, what do the speakers think about the Liberal Democrat-led campaign on musicians and actors? The fact that it is only now coming home to people that whether you're a classical musician or want to play in a gig, you can't go easily over to Europe, to the EU, or you can't. The EU citizens can't come to the UK, and this is going to be very unpopular for the people in this country and in the EU who like music. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If Christine could form the last round of responses from our speakers.
Yep.
So Christine, Irina, and then Chris.
I'll start with Graham's point. Graham, I think you're absolutely right. I think in terms of positioning, we need to position ourselves as the party of business, and particularly small business and of enterprise, because the combination of COVID-19 and Brexit has made so many businesses, I hear it every day in my constituency, so many businesses feel that many of them voted for this government, but they all feel left behind by this government, that the government has abandoned them. and that they don't matter. So yes, you're absolutely right. The only people I have heard so far say, oh yeah, this Brexit deal is fine, are hedge fund managers. So that part of the City of London, that part of the business community and the economy is probably still going to support the Conservatives. But yes, Jürgen is absolutely right. There is a vast number of small businesses in this country who we can be targeting. And actually moving forward, our economic policy is going to be very much about what are you doing for the small businesses? Why are they being left behind? Why are the people that Theresa May and David Cameron said were the backbone of this economy now being abandoned by the Conservative Party? So I think it's very important that we position ourselves there. Monroe's point is a very good one. People I don't think actually know why we voted against the deal, because we voted against it in the Commons as well. I think, well, why have the Liberal Democrats done that? And that comes back again to messaging and getting our message out there. We've always been good at it in the past when we've been in the sort of situation we're in now, where we are a small party now in comparison to the others. And I'm going to say something which a lot of you will think is sacrilegious, and I actually hesitate to say it myself, but we need to look at what the SNP and, heaven help me, UKIP did, and how they put themselves to the forefront of the agenda. 10 years ago, the SNP had 6 MPs, and now they have 56 MPs. And that is what we have to look at. We have to look at the way they put out their message, the tactics they used, whether they focused on a wide barrage of policies or a single focus on one thing. And I think that is, we have to look at that, and we have to consult within the party, and we have to do focus groups and all the rest of it. But we have to look at how they succeeded, how they turned it round. Now, UKIP never got elected to Parliament, but I think probably we would all have to admit that their influence over the past decade has been hugely damaging in Britain, but all pervasive. The Conservative Party was jumping to their tune all the time. So I think that is where we have to look to how did they get their message out? How did they do it? And look at that template and follow it. Does that answer those questions?
Irina, I think we have to move on to you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to, I very much agree with Christine on this point. I'm going to move on to the question about citizens and a potential Windrush scandal. And very sadly, I think you're very right. Remember, the hostile environment was introduced by Theresa May, who is something of a sweet lamb compared to Priti Patel. And despite the various assurances in the Withdrawal Agreement and the Withdrawal Act for citizens' rights on paper, I fear that the practical implementation of these rights to date doesn't really inspire much hope for the future. And very briefly, this is not really Brexit related, but it's very much related to the hostile environment. My daughter is 16. She was born in 2004 to 2 EU citizens who both had settled in the UK. We both had lived here by that time for more than 10 years. Despite that fact, she cannot get a UK passport without having to register, which costs £1,096 at the moment. Although she actually has acquired UK citizenship by birth, the Home Office requires this money to be paid because, as they say, she was born in the wrong year. Between 2002 and 2006, they forgot to implement EU law properly, and they require that I produce a document called permanent some form of indefinite leave to remain at that time, although of course there was no such document available. This is just an example where the Home Office is just trying to make life really, really difficult for people. And yes, if you don't have settled status that you can prove by the end of June of this year, and as an EU citizen, you can be deported. My daughter is already looking forward to it, actually, escape from home. But no, but seriously, it is a point. It is a good point, and I fear it is another Windrush scandal in the making. Very briefly to musicians and actors. Yes, it is a huge problem. And remember, we currently have no freedom of movement for very different reasons, of course, because there is a pandemic and we're not allowed to travel anywhere. Once we get out of that misery, the new misery is going to be the new rules. And for musicians, UK musicians who want to now travel on a tour throughout the EU member states, apart from Ireland, which has the free travel, the common travel zone, will be faced with 26 different regimes of different visa requirements, different maximum stays. So they really have to employ some form of strategies before they can go on any tour. Incoming musicians, so those who want to come to the UK, will have to prove, if they stay for longer than their tourist visa, and in particular if they want to do any paid work. So as soon as they get any money for a gig, they're required to find a visa, to apply for a visa, the conditions of which are not quite clear. But it seems that they have to prove that they are invited by an established organization and that they are established professionals, which of course for a young upstart musician is going to be very difficult. There is a maximum stay of, I believe, 30 days, which is impossible for people who go on an orchestra tour, for example, and loads and loads and loads of red tape we don't even know about yet, because we haven't had the chance to travel anywhere at the moment. And I fear there will be many, many more stories about individual misery coming our way. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Chris.
Yeah, okay, I'll try to be quick. So Graham Watson's thing, I think is absolutely right. There's a gaping space there for Lib Dems or for Labour if they wanted to take that kind of mantle of party of business. And it is, I mean, is that absolutely kind of extraordinary if you think back, not just if you think back to the kind of Margaret Thatcher years, this kind of, this championship of entrepreneurship and small business, and small businesses in particular is where it is. I think less so than trying to get a lot of support from the city, just because at the end of the day, those guys don't really care that much. They will just go and work around things and do business where they want to. The business community is completely different now to how it was at the time of, say, the 1975 referendum. It is not British in the way that it was then, in terms of ownership and in terms of orientation. The small business community is a completely different matter, which brings me to the points made by Lord Palmer. I mean, I have to completely, reject the characterization of what I said, or if it came across like that, I clearly didn't express myself well. I wasn't trying to say things would all be fine and settle to some kind of new normal. I said that big businesses will readjust their supply chains. They're currently readjusting their supply chains, and they will not start cheerleading to readjust them again. And that is just the reality. And again, it's because big business is not rooted in communities or in a nation in the same kind of way that small businesses are. And that's that is just the reality of kind of modern business. But that also links to this question about, is it just teething problems that are going on at the moment? Is it just a few mistakes and so on and so forth? Well, the point about that is, yes, some of it around customs formalities will be a few mistakes, but you only have to make a few mistakes as a business before maybe only one, before your customers go and get their stuff somewhere else. Yeah. And so, and what that means is that, particularly for small businesses, you just make a few mistakes and that's it. Your business is gone. It's completely wiped out because you haven't got it. And similarly, there's an idea, well, businesses, that they will quickly learn how to do it right. But again, for small businesses, this is not likely to be true, because it's not just one thing they have to get their head around. It's multiple processes. So they'll make one mistake the first time, but a different mistake the second time. But there's no time to learn. Again, big companies, which can employ customs agents and so forth, are in a better kind of position. On the other hand, to the extent that businesses do start doing it right, that, as I tried to express in what I said before, it removes the visibility of the damage, but the damage is still there. It's just that it's just been incorporated into the new cost base of the businesses, which then has knock-on effects on their competitiveness or on their capacity to employ people. And very quickly, finally, there's something, I think, that I can't see the chat questions, but I believe something about data. And this is really, really key thing which is coming down the track, because you know, I think the question was, are there problems around that? Well, there are not problems about that currently, because temporarily, in terms of the TCA, things just we've got data adequacy, but there will be an EU decision on that, I think, within quite a few months, as I understand it. And if the EU decision is that there is not adequacy, there is not data equivalence, that is going to be a massive business problem. And by the way, it's also going to be a massive problem for cooperation of security agencies.
Okay, thank you very much indeed to all three of our excellent speakers. Very, very appreciative, and give you all a virtual round of applause. We shall keep at this. We shall keep opposing Brexit, and I'm confident one day we shall get there, back to where we want to be. So thank you all, and to all our participants, and to Subu for doing this, and to Trevor, and over to Emily for a final vote of thanks.
Great, thank you, Nick. I just want to reiterate what Nick said. A big thank you to all of our panelists. That was an amazing just conversation that you guys had, and I think everybody would agree. We could probably all sit here for another hour or two and just listen to you talk on the subject. Secondly, Professor Chris Gray, I think I found your blog. I did search for the best one, so I'm going to send that link out to everyone. Along with Nick, Nick has written an article for the New European. I've just popped those in the chat to everybody, so you can copy those before we end the call. And I did have a list of apologies that we wanted to mention. The Right Honourable Sir Simon Hughes, Professor Ashok Misra, Professor Dame Anne-Marie Rafferty, Barbara Ward, and Baroness Sal Brinton. And I also wanted to thank our other colleagues for attending. We've had colleagues from all over the world, the Crown Dependencies, the British Overseas Territories, from Europe, Commonwealth countries in North America, Asia, and Africa, and our colleagues in the US. So thank you very much, and we hope to see everyone again soon for another one of our Zoom talks.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry,
Thank
and thank you very much to Nick for pulling all of this together, and to Trevor Peel, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Very much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.